Hello. Okay, I'm going to do what I've done for most of the day, which is try and challenge you a bit about what you do, how you think. Emergency lighting, they asked me to look at technology. So I'm going to tell you what I found. Is that okay? You'd be interested in that? Yeah, great. Emergency lighting has probably changed quite a bit. When I first came across emergency lighting, I was working as a theatre engineer. And the emergency lighting was done by little P lamps. And they were connected to this room with loads of batteries in it. And you had to dress up in a rubber white jacket with gloves and make sure that you weren't killed as you entered the room. That was emergency lighting. Up until that point, I'd never come across it. So in the 70s, we kind of invented this self-contained thing, which came about. And then we started using the rule of thumb, which are brilliant rules of thumb. 1 in 10, every 10th luminaire has to be an emergency luminaire. That's kind of how we worked it out. What rules of thumb do we use now? Nobody's going to admit they use a rule of thumb. Rule of thumb usually comes from a guy called Dave. I do apologise to everybody called Dave, but in every practice or in every business, there's, what do you use? A 1 in 4 now. Why? Dave said. That's normally how it happens. And we continue to use these things. So I'm going to look at what technologies we currently have. Batteries. Let's look at batteries. Batteries, self-contained, big thing. First of all, we'll look at the first one, NiCad. Come across it? Nickel cadmium batteries? Yeah. That's what's used in backstreet conversions. Backstreet conversions. No, most conversions use NiCad. They behave really well, behave decent temperature-wise. They're fairly heavy, reasonable power density, long stories life, no operational life. Anybody who's old enough to remember what a compass is? Yeah, nod at me just so I know you're there. Compass, brilliant. I used to love to stab things with a compass when I was a young kid to see how they reacted. So I call it the compass stab. You can stab this with a compass really well. It's really very well protected. But the one big issue is it is exceptionally harmful to the environment. Cadmium. If cadmium gets into the water table, people don't get sick, they die. And we recycle these, do we? Hands up, who puts all their batteries in a wee storage thing? NiCad, yeah, good on you. Good on you. NiCad's ridiculously harmful. Anybody want to know what the decay time of a NiCad battery cell is? In other words, the time it stops being a NiCad battery cell. Do you want to have a guess? Boy, you're all really not having guesses today. There's no right and wrong here. Yeah, good man. No. Just because it's you. Just because it's you. No, 125 years. 125 years. So I took it upon myself to ask my council, what happens to my NiCad batteries? And after a series of really long-winded, yet not very clever letters, I didn't find out. I think there's a football pitch in Serbia lights up green at night. I don't know what happens to these things, but I'm telling you, really ridiculously poor from an environmental point of view. We have an expectation that we change the world. We haven't changed in 30 years. When I say we, I mean the lighting fraternity, because nobody else uses these. Toys, don't use them anymore. Mobile phones, don't use them anymore. Laptops, don't use them anymore. Why? Because they all moved on. They all realised there was an issue. The British government have tried banning these twice, and it never comes to fruition because there's a whole load of people go, I'll have no job. But we have a responsibility. So responsible companies now, if you do have to use self-contained, which I don't think you do, obviously, of course I wouldn't. But I think there's other ways of doing these things. I think there's other ways around it, and I think if you have a responsibility to your environment that you don't use these. I'm sorry. So what is the alternative? The alternative is a nickel metal hydride battery. And I like the fact that the packaging's green because it makes me feel better. I go, yeah, it's green. Very stable discharge, exceptional safety performance, good lifetime. 5-year standby. Will self-discharge a little if not trickled, and it's twice the capacity of an iCAD footprint. Essentially, the difference between these two is one is more environmentally friendly. It works slightly better. It needs a bit more husbandry. It needs a wee bit more looking after from an electronics point of view. But it's lighter and it performs better. Why don't we use this one? You're going to say it. Go on, say it loudly. Cost. Because it costs a bit more. So I'll tell you what, no, we'll use the rubbish one. The other thing is polymer batteries have no memory. Anybody in here remembers the early days of mobile phones? When you got your new mobile phone, the dude in the shop said, take it home and charge it up to full. Why? Because the stupid iCAD inside it has got a memory. So tell it where full is and tell it where empty is. Charge it up to full, empty it right down. But what do? We never really discharge it right down, and we never really charge it right up. Who's got a laptop or a mobile phone that won't hold a charge? Lasts for minutes instead of days. Yeah, that's because the technology is really poor. So you want something with no memory in it. This is honestly, this is the best way to go. Please ask questions. Secondly, lithium battery. Lithium ion, very good density to weight ratio. In other words, it holds loads of charge, but it doesn't weigh very much. You know these kids' toys that are stopping planes at airports? They're driven by this type of battery. Relatively low self-discharge. In other words, they hold the charge and they hold onto it and they hold onto it for a long period of time. Shorter operating life when compared to nickel metal hydride, but safety under rapid discharge needs improvement for this. So in other words, if you want it to go from there to there really quickly, it heats up. Samsung fell a bit foul to that. Anyway, fairly lightweight cells. So there are alternatives. And why don't we use this one? Cost. And then finally, a LiFo P4 lithium iron phosphate, long storage, operational life, needs more work, typically additional housings. This one takes a bit more work. It's got really good energy density. Price is similar to nickel metal hydride, but needs extra charging circuitry again, so there's more electronics. So there's a bit more involved in it and a bit more cost. This is where we currently are today. And we've been here for a long time. We really need to move one way or the other, but then there is a cost implication. That's awful, isn't it? There's a cost implication. Don't use it. No. Anyway, so that's from battery. That's where we are from a technology point of view, where batteries are concerned. But it's about environmental impact, and it's about how you feel. If you are in pine scatter cushions, lintel fondue and wearing sandals, then you should absolutely not touch this with a barge pole, because then you're going against everything you talk about. So please talk to people around you, talk to clients. Then from a technology point of view, emergency lighting has kind of moved on. This we convert a luminaire that was never meant to be involved in emergency lighting, and we convert it somehow using batteries and other bits we add to it, and then it can dribble light in emergency mode. And there's like a dribble factor, and yeah, you've got to be careful with this, that, and the other. Hey, the world has changed. We have developed luminaires that are specifically for emergency lighting, that give you distribution and give you the option to design your emergency lighting system completely separately from everything else. Second offer is the same thing, but with a kind of like a test panel that'll tell you what you've done and when you've done it and where the problems are and faults like that. And then we have decentralized battery, and then we have central battery. They all have technology updates, they all are really good at doing things. If you remember these in the old days, these are not the same thing. They perform and behave differently. 3 typical types of system. So let's look at the pros and cons. System 1, the advantages. It's obviously faster and less expensive on the install. Standard wiring can be used, means failure. You've got load hardware and equipment costs. The integrity of the system is greater because each luminaire is independent of the others, and system can be easily extended. That's got a battery in it, but it's not an iCAD battery. And then the distribution of these luminaires is specifically developed using very clever lenses and things like that to do linear corridors, to do squares, to do circles, or do whatever you need. The disadvantages, environmental conditions will vary throughout the system, and batteries can be adversely affected. The batteries can be affected. Battery life is limited between 2 and 4 years, depending if, whenever it's installed, the contractor on site during the building works will kill the electricity at least 6 times a day. And then at the end, when the building gets opened up, he goes, my emergency batteries aren't working. It's your fault. I'm going to point at you because you're smiling. You know that. It's your fault. I'm going to point at you as well. But you know that's what happens. So the battery life of these types of luminaires depends on how you use it. But testing requires isolation and observation of the luminaires on an individual basis. So the next version we have, and I've got to make this point, this has got a test panel, which, costs, let's say for talk's sake, a couple of grand. If you don't use this, you got to pay another company who sends 2 men the ladder, because one man's not allowed to carry a ladder by himself in case he hurts himself. So it's 2 men the ladder are going to go around every single light fitting, emergency fitting you have, and they operate it using a fish key. Do you know you have to be trained how to use a fish key now? So you stick the fish key in. I'm not going to tell you, I've had the training, so it's not up to me to train you. Anyway, fish key, stand there, 2 men in a ladder, and watch and see what's happening, or see if there's a wee light comes on, or whatever. The cost of that is actually more than the cost of the wee panel, which strikes me as being the strangest thing in the world. Because what happens is, you go, I want to use the wee panel because it makes so much sense, tells me everything I need to know, and then some Herbert comes along and goes, cheapen. We want to cheapen this project. That's the first thing to go. Because you don't pay for the 2 men in the ladder. Just strikes me as being strange. I don't know. Maybe I see the world differently. But the advantages definitely are records can be kept either digitally or printed depending on the system. Maintenance is easy. If you've got a couple of these panels in the building, it's easy to go to the panel, it goes, such and such is wrong on level 4. Wow, I'm off. You don't have to go looking for little red. I can't remember. Les, is it red for good, green for bad? Is it flashing lemon for it's dinner time? I don't know. I never can remember. But the panel would tell you. I don't know. Disadvantages. You have to run a 2-core wire round. That's very, very difficult to do, 2-core wire round. Testing requires isolation and observation, but in the long term, you'll end up saving. That with its own battery, reporting back to that, that's kind of a technological update that we have. Secondary, we'll have decentralized central battery or centralized central battery. Decentralized, 1 battery unit per floor area, controlling whatever you want them to control. Batteries only need changing every 10 years. And by the way, they're safe lead acid or gel acid batteries, which are safer. Makes a whole load of sense. Disadvantages, if you're using a main central battery, you have to give it its own house. But the good thing about this is that this type of technology, whilst it takes more design, does more design mean more fees? Yeah, should do. It takes more design. It also takes different cable type, FP200, and a separate room. But the people that like this are universities, hospitals, places like that really want to see what's happening with their system on a regular basis. Testing and documentation is absolutely clear what happens. So What do you have? 20 to 10-year lifespan for the batteries. Web-based reporting. Yeah, you can have. Zone circuit monitoring, which is very clever. You have multiple gear solutions. You have wizard and commission. The emergency fittings can be switchable. You've got a battery temperature chart. This is my favorite. Heartbeat monitoring. Hospitals and universities love this because they can go and see exactly what's happening with the system whenever it's happening. Obviously AC/DC or AC/AC, and it's designed for low power LEDs. So it has benefits. The problem is, good man, you say, yeah, you keep watching. Don't bite your nails. Yeah, cost. So incrementally, everything costs slightly more for the better technology. But tell you what, no, we'll just stick with self-contained NiCad, will we? Yeah, let's do that. And when it comes down to real technology, I couldn't find any in the emergency world because it's like stuck in the 70s. The one thing I did find was this little gizmo. So this is a near field wand. And when you get an emergency luminaire, you can touch the wand on the back of the luminaire and look at your app. And the wand talks to the app. And you can do it without the luminaire being powered up. How cool is that? That's cool because you get a big box of these and you can give Dave the job, you can give Dave the job of setting them up for room two, right? That one's one of those. I want it to be, and you can see there, you can set the switch mode at the AC level and you can tell it where it's maintained or non-maintained. And you can do all that off the wand to the app without powering it up. You put all those boxes in the pile and you go, that's room 2, done, commissioned. Clever? Yeah, clever. But that's the only thing I could come across because we really still are in the dark ages of technology where emergency lighting is concerned. Thanks very much.